Okay, I really got to stop with the video making, okay? But I'm going to make one last comment on translations because I get, I don't know, hundreds of emails about this. So let me try to make it simple for you. Here's what I do when I study, okay? First of all, my pastor used to teach from the King James Version. And then every time there was a word that was mistranslated or needed more explanation because the Greek is so different from the English, he stops and explains the Greek word. So you learn how to write Greek from listening to him. I learned it in 18 months, but you probably would learn it faster. You learn it as you're going along. So you're hearing the English and you're hearing the Greek, and it becomes real natural to know what the Greek is or the Hebrew. Okay? So that's how I learned it. Secondly, though, is that when I personally look in BibleWorks, which is what I show in my videos, okay, it's software that I bought at BibleWorks.com. When I show the Hebrew and the Greek words, I'm looking at the Hebrew and Greek, and I usually just know what the words are when I just look at them. But I also look at the lexicons beneath the words. When you put your mouse on a word in BibleWorks, it immediately shows the lexicons beneath. You have to sort of play with it to get it to be that easy, but I did that. Okay, and that's what I show you in the videos to make it easier for you to learn the words on screen than it was for me to learn them. Okay, that's the second thing I do. I'm always looking at BibleWorks. All right, I'm not relying on my own understanding, and I'm not relying on my pastor either. You know, I've got that background, but I'm not really using that first. I'm using the actual words in the Bible and the lexicons, and that's what you see me do in the videos. It's spontaneous when I'm doing it. I don't know how to rehearse anything. Okay, so that's the second thing. Get some kind of software like BibleWorks or Logos. The free version of it is eSword, but eSword's not very good. Okay, because it uses Strong's, and Strong's is really a lexicon that's meant for people who already know the Greek and Hebrew and just need a reminder. All right, so it's not good for learning the language the first time. And if you're going to pick up, if you're willing to spring for the software, get BibleWorks, because it's got a lot of language learning tools in it that Logos doesn't have. Okay, so that's the first thing I do. The second thing I do, and you'll see me do it in the videos, is I show a bunch of English translations. And they're already bundled in BibleWorks, and that saves you hundreds of dollars versus buying hardback Bibles. They have hundreds and hundreds of translations in all the major languages. And they've got at least, gotta be 60 different translations in English. And I look at them all. I don't just look at one or two. Okay? And that's what you really need to do if you're going to use translations. You need to look at least 10 translations. Okay, but let's say you don't have you're too tired to do that or something. So here's a shortcut that I use, and I do use this every day. I use the King James Version, I use the NASB, and I use the NIV the most. Those are the three I use the most. And I use them for particular reasons. The King James Version, their approach to translation was to translate the same word the same way all across the Bible unless they really just couldn't do it or they were tired and made a mistake. That was their philosophy when they translated, because they were giving, their particular Bible was already going to go out to people who knew the Hebrew and Greek, and the pastors wanted a quick way to make the Bible in English relevant to their people while they taught them the Hebrew and Greek. In other words, the way I learned the Bible under my pastor is the way the Bible's been taught for 400 years. Okay, the pastors just needed a translation so they could ease their congregations into learning the original languages. And that's how it was taught back then by the English teachers of the Bible. King James himself learned it that way. All right, so that you'd be learning the English and the original at the same time. And it would help you to associate the English with the Hebrew or Greek word that underlies it. So the King James Version was translated to be a literal translation for the sake of the teachers who already knew the original languages and were trying to get it across to the congregations. So that's why I still use the King James Version to this day, and of course that's how my pastor used it. Alright? The NASB is the next closest thing. And in Bible Works in particular, it's more helpful than the King James in that A, it's in more modern English, but B, and this is really important, any quotes in the New Testament of the Old Testament are rendered in capital letters in BibleWorks.com rendition of the NASB. Alright, so that's why I use it. It helps me quickly find the Old Testament quotes, so I don't have to keep searching on the Greek to find them. And then I go back into the original languages from there because, English is my native tongue. Alright, so that's why I use the NASB. NASB, at times, is a very inferior translation of the KJV. The KJV is at times an inferior translation, but, it's like a NASCAR race. Every single verse has got some English translation which wins in a particular clause, and then some other version will win in the next clause. Alright? But they're all useful. Don't ever throw out a translation of the Bible. Ever. Okay? Every single Bible is really the Bible. It's just that not every single Bible is 100% really the Bible. That's what you got to remember. Okay? And God will point out to you when you got to search in some other version or look to the original text. Just keep using 1 John 1:9 and He'll do that. Okay, then the third version I use, and I use it for particular purposes, is the NIV. Sometimes the translations in the NIV are brilliant. And a lot of times the translations in the NIV are horrible. But one thing the NIV gets right over all of its competitors, especially in the Old Testament, and in the New to a certain extent, is it captures the flavor of the passage. You have to read like large blocks of it. For example, if you really want to get a handle on what the book of Hebrews says, read the entire book in the NIV. Some of the translations of the verses in the NIV of the book of Hebrews are awful. But the flavor of what the writer's trying to say is captured just the same. Alright? The sarcasm of Paul is captured best in the NIV. The sarcasm and the tone of a lot of Old Testament passages are captured the best in the NIV. So when I'm trying to get my head around a whole book or a whole chapter, a lot of times what I'll first do is I'll go to the NIV and read it just to get the essence of what the guys translating it thought of what it meant. And then I'll go back and piece by piece, verse by verse, word by word, read the chapter using the original and the other translations, to check myself as to, whether I understand it. I'm always auditing what I understand. I never accept my own beliefs because there's no way I can be 100% right. Only God is 100% right. So I hope this helps you understand how to approach translations. And I'm sorry, but I really can't make any more videos now. Good luck, and God bless.